The third of 3 sports titles to come out on the monochrome Neo Geo Pocket is Yumekobo's swing at making a tennis game. We saw this development team in the previous episode with their fantastic Puzzle Link. Now, there may have only been 2 other sports games so far, there weren't actually that many more to come in fairness, but in terms of success stories, we're on a 50% rating I'd say. Baseball Stars was a bit limited in the things you could actually do, but was equally one of the smoothest, most playable baseball sims I've ever played on a handheld console. However, the system's solitary soccer title, Neo Geo Cup 98, had the opposite result in a way, being sadly quite disappointing in the gameplay department, despite having a vast and varied assortment of options and a real depth in the team building side of things. Game modes, tactical fluffery and all that kind of stuff is nice to have, but honestly with a console you're probably playing in short 20 to 30 minute spurts, they're not nearly as important as engaging gameplay, a working physics engine, and good, solid, reliable controls. So given the choice, I'd always stump for how Baseball Stars did it over the footy one. Thankfully that's what we have here in Pocket Tennis. You get the choice between tournament play or an exhibition match, and a bunch of different characters with their own strengths and weaknesses. There are 8 to choose from at the start of the game, with a couple of unlockable players should you do well in the tournaments. Some players, like Alice or Mao, have really good court speed, meaning you'll need to compensate for her reduced shot power by dashing all over the place and trying to return the ball to an area where your opponent won't get to it. Others, such as David, have a lot more power but can't move quite as nimbly, so your best bet there is to try and hit past the other player with force. The controls in-game are as simple as you like. The A button hits a regular stroke, with B doing a softer one, with this also counting on serves. You can go for an ace, I've never managed this, by hitting it hard with A, or be more delicate. The course of the ball is determined not only by the direction you choose, but also by how long you hold it for. Don't go all out here because depending on your position you can easily fault if you put too much angle on it. Still, pretty intuitive controls all round, which is great. You get lobs and volleys to add into your arsenal of shots as well, which are drawn really well perspective-wise. There are quite a lot of tournaments that unlock once you win the previous one. At first you'll be going through single set competition over 3 rounds, but after time the match length will increase up to 5 sets. These tournaments can go on for a while. Luckily the opponents don't really get more difficult or anything like that. Think of it like a tour, how they do in actual tennis or something, whereby you might be playing in all sorts of different places or formats, but the players are typically the same. For the most part anyway. If you get to something called the Ares Cup, you'll play a special character at the end called Karo. Beat him and you can actually unlock him. There's also someone called Amebia who you'll unlock after beating the first tournament. Like I say, there are loads of different cups to win, some are even thematic based on the time of year, or the time of year you've set your Neo Geo to anyway. So for instance, you might play the Capricorn Cup in January and so on. We're already getting a feel for the graphical accomplishments that were frequently achieved on Neo Geo. Again, I don't really want to compare to Game Boy all that much, but it's pertinent here I think. The screen here is only 8 rows larger than the Game Boy or Color, so you can't even put it down to a better resolution necessarily, but so often the sprites and backgrounds just had that much more attention to detail put into it, especially compared to where we are in the Game Boy Color's library by now. But it's not just about the fidelity of the individual frames, but the slickness of the animation that always catches me off guard a little bit. I'm not a techie guy, so I don't know why this would be, but you rarely, if ever, saw the equivalent smoothness on Game Boy, and it never hinders frame rate or anything either. For the sake of balance, I've yet to find a sound design that I'm super impressed by. The voice synthesis on Neo Geo Cup was really clear, but I prefer the harsher Nintendo waveforms from a Game Boy chiptune as opposed to the more rounded off Neo Geo ones, which sound similar to a Game Gear or a Master System. Not to say it's bad at all, just a personal preference, and I'm sure there are some fantastic soundtracks on Neo Geo, why wouldn't there be? Sports games are obviously more fun if you're already a fan of the subject matter. I've learnt that to my detriment plenty of times in the past. I wouldn't consider myself a fan of basically any of them. I like pro wrestling, if that counts. It doesn't. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy the video games. I've had a whale of a time with American football titles, baseball, ice hockey, basketball not so much. Someone please find me a decent basketball game on a handheld. Well, not really caring about any of the actual events. The main thing is, are the controls responsive? Do they do what they say they do? Is there a stupidly long difficulty hump to get over, or can you just pick up and go for it? I got this one immediately. It's the sort of thing that if you can't get a feel for it, there's not really anything that anyone can do to help you. It's so intuitive and immediately just feels great. There's possibly not enough variation for me to play through every single tournament, if that's a thing you can even achieve in this game, but if you want to crack off some tennis, then look no further.